Adam Schefter, we start with you, though, because we have some key injury updates to get to. Yeah. Let's start with both teams, but let's go to the Chiefs first.
Well, it looks like the Chiefs are going to be without two key players in Super Bowl LVIII. Joe Thuney has been battling that ankle injury here, and it's a situation where basically he is unlikely to play, considered a long shot in this particular matchup. They're also waiting to see if Jerick McKinnon will come back. Thuney's got the pectoral, McKinnon's got the groin. They're both unlikely to play. Again, we'll see if they could somehow, against the odds, make it back. And George Kittle has been battling a toe injury, but it hasn't held him back in practice. And if you just were around him this week, you could tell there's zero chance, despite missing practice last week with that toe injury, that he will not be out there on Sunday in Super Bowl LVIII. He will be. He'll be out there. So no Thuney due to the pec. No McKinnon, it looks like, but Kittle looks like he should be ready to go. And then also there's the question of the 49ers practice field and what they're dealing with. They were not happy with the practice conditions there Monday. They had a walkthrough today. Tomorrow and Friday will be key practice days, and we'll see whether or not they complain further to the league and see if they ask the league to switch practice sites. That's still up in the air.
That'll be interesting to keep an eye on as we're just a handful of days ahead of this. All right, since it's Wednesday, we had to bring out a little Wideout Wednesday, taking a closer look at the receivers in the Super Bowl. Rashee Rice has been indispensable for Patrick Mahomes. He's averaged over 9 yards per attempt with 7 touchdowns and no interceptions when targeting Rice this season, significantly better than his numbers when targeting the other Chiefs wideouts. Rice has 20 catches this postseason. All of the Chiefs wide receivers have just 11 combined. So, Dan, earlier on in the season, we were wondering who was going to step up in this KC offense. Rice has been that player. What has allowed him to have this breakout moment this season?
The main thing was Kansas City figured out what he could not do and what he could do. And really one of the storylines of the game is going to be which number one wide receiver, both Brandon Ayuk for San Francisco and Rashee Rice for Kansas City, shows up. And I think the thing that stood out over the last half of the season was they stopped asking Rashee Rice to stop his feet. It was straight line routes on a consistent basis. Get this big, athletic, powerful athlete moving. You see him on the shallow cross there and a slant. And that's one of the things that has stood out. And when it comes to the trust for Patrick Mahomes and the understanding is, instead of asking this guy to be this nuanced route runner early on in his career in a way that wasn't necessary and that he was really struggling with, was, hey, why don't we just give him this route tree that we can allow his athleticism to shine and to be the biggest part. And when they get him running straight line and they don't ask him to necessarily stop his feet, he's a dynamic player and a big-time threat. And if he can have that success against San Francisco, that goes a long, long way for Kansas City's both horizontal and vertical pass game.
Yeah, D-Wood, to that point, why is Rice so important in this game, specifically in the matchup against the 49ers?
Well, the reason he's important is because it's going to be strength on strength when you talk about this matchup between the Kansas City Chiefs and Travis Kelce going up against that San Francisco 49ers defense. Think about it. The middle of the 49ers defense, that's where Fred Warner and Dre Greenlaw, reside. So that's a strength of the San Francisco 49ers defense. They're going to need Rashee Rice, whether it be his, after his yak yardage after the catch, being able to stretch, down the field. On those go routes, they're going to need some of that because it's going to be tough sledding, getting a lot of yardage between the numbers against that 49ers defense.
Yeah, just to put this in perspective, Mahomes has completed 96 passes to Rice so far this season. The only wideout Mahomes has completed more passes to in a single season is Tyreek Hill. That's just how much Rashee Rice has become a go-to target for Patrick Mahomes. Let's talk about another receiver in this game on the other side. And for this, we go to Brandon Ayuk. He's such an important part of the 49ers' success this season, okay? In the San Francisco's 49ers 13 wins this season, Ayuk has gotten 15% of the team's targets and caught 8 touchdowns. In the 49ers' 5 losses, his target share is just 8%, and he has 0 touchdowns. So the numbers bear it out. He's crucial to getting wins, and some of it, too, was him stepping up when Deebo Samuel was hurt, Dan. But how did the 49ers use Ayuk to have the success that they have?
He's really the opposite of Rashee Rice. He is their nuanced, elite route runner, and the thing that he does so good is when he gets down the field, that's when he starts to separate against the defender. This is against the Lions in the NFC Championship game. Third down, press man, to set the defender and leave him on that out route is special. And then some of the abilities to widen, understand space, the vertical spacing of an offense. They set he kind of leaves defenders where he doesn't, or where he wants them to be, to attack where he actually wants to get to. This was interesting to understand. Part of it is their offense. It's the scheme of their offense. But to be a wide receiver that attacks the middle of the field, you have to have one of two things. You have to have a frame that just gives you that big body. You saw like a Mike Evans in there and a DK Metcalf. Or you have to have elite route running skills to know, okay, when I widen this defender and I separate him, create a window, well, there's an underneath guy that I either have to clear or stay away from. And I think that's the separating aspect for Ayuk's game that's really allowed him to have that career season. Again, a huge part of their passing game on Sunday for San Francisco is going to be, can he do that versus man coverage?
You know, this is one of the more fascinating matchups in this game because we know the Chiefs, particularly their secondary, is a strength of their team. They got multiple corners that excel in man-to-man coverage. So whether it be through formation or just the elite route running and releases of Brandon Ayuk, that's going to be a matchup that I think a lot of football fans will really need to watch. And he's going to have to come through on that because these Chiefs corners, they are really good in man-to-man coverage.
Sal Paolantonio covering the 49ers for us all week. And Sal, what can you tell us about what's going on with San Francisco today?
Laura, they're on the practice field right now, about 13 miles from here. They left about an hour ago on a caravan of buses out to the UNLV campus, and they are practicing as we speak. And I can tell you, covering a lot of Super Bowls, that the mindset come Wednesday when you're finally getting on the practice field and it feels like you're practicing to play in a Super Bowl, it's just different. Talking to these players the last couple of days, they were ready, anxious to get on the field and practice. They've been talking to a lot of people around the organization. Brock Purdy, one of them, talking to Steve Young and Joe Montana about how to prepare and play in this Super Bowl. Listen to Brock Purdy talk about it.
Just briefly talking to Joe, it's been just pretty simple, just in terms of, you got a good team around you. Just obviously go through your reads and what Kyle is calling and trust in Kyle. You don't need to be the superstar or anything. You can go out and just do your job, do it well, and you got a good team around you, and you guys can win that way. And then with Steve, Steve we just talked about just our mindsets, in the NFL, with all the stuff going around on the outside, being able to, sink back into what you believe and understand who you are and what your purpose is.
Just to think how surreal that is, right, Laura? If you want to go out and do your job as a quarterback, you just have to ring up Joe Montana and Steve Young for a little bit of advice. It's good, and then there's a lot of pressure that goes with it, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's a name drop if I've ever seen one. Thanks to Sal with us all week long covering the 49ers. And they face a challenge in the trenches against the Chiefs, no doubt. KC has the best pass block win rate in the NFL this season at 75%, 7 percentage points better than the next closest team. The 49ers O-line ranked 15th in the NFL in this metric. So, D. Wood, let's get our O-lineman working here a little bit more, talking about the trenches. Give us the O-line, D-line matchup that you're watching when the Chiefs are on offense.
Yeah, listen, we know that, first of all, Andy Reid is a former offensive lineman at heart, so he knows before we talk about anything in the pass game, protection is paramount. And so I'm looking at the tackles, okay? I'm looking at Donovan Smith and Jawan Taylor. Both of those guys, we've seen their struggles during the season, but the great thing about what Andy Reid and company has done is they protected those guys, whether it be personnel or by formation, putting guys next to those offensive tackles to space out the defensive end to get, or chips to give those guys help. And I think you're going to see a lot more of that in this game against the San Francisco 49ers defensive line.
Well, let me ask you this. I was talking about this with Marcus yesterday on the show. In relation to those tackles and against like a Chase Young and Bosa, do you think that those two perimeter players have to dominate the game? Or do you think that they have to kind of do their job and then let a player like an Armstead or a Hargrave reap the benefits of that? What do you think is most important for them to have that one or two big moments as this game goes on?
Yeah, listen, I think they have to do their job, Dan. And what I mean by that is that you got to rush Patrick Mahomes the right way. Too many times we see these defensive ends rush behind the quarterback and they open up rush lanes. You're always taught as a defensive lineman that you got to rush and stay even with the quarterback. And that's what you want to do with Patrick Mahomes and then let, those defensive tackles collapse the pocket. That's how you can disrupt Patrick Mahomes in the passing game.
I also think it's going to be huge for those defensive ends. Bosa does a better job of it. Andy Reid is going to make them stop the run. Matt Nagy is going to make them handle the run on early downs. Yes. We've seen it consistently throughout this year and certainly the playoffs of that pin and pull run game. It may look different with the way that Kansas City is going to get to it, maybe a little bit more horizontal stretch rather than just a downhill run. But Andy Reid's not going to just let this group rush Patrick Mahomes. He's going to force them to handle all those different looks and defend the run before they can just chase 15 around.
D-Wood, let's talk about the 49ers O-line versus the Chiefs D-line. What are you looking out for there?
Yeah, so I'm looking specifically at the right tackle, Colton McKivitz, for the San Francisco 49ers. He's had some issues as far as pass protection is concerned. But again, we know that the San Francisco 49ers, whether through formation or personnel, they're going to protect those guys. The 49ers run a lot of, they put a lot of tight ends next to the tackles, a lot of reduced type of formations to really put a lot of junk out there for those pass rushers to try to fight through. But what I think the Kansas City Chiefs are going to do, we know that Chris Jones likes to move around along the defensive line and likes to find favorable matchups. I would anticipate Chris Jones being over there at the right tackle spot, seeing if he can make things happen over there.
Yeah, it's interesting. So I could see on early downs, Steve Spagnuolo trying to play Chris on Trent Williams' side, so to the San Francisco 49ers offensive left and the Kansas City Chiefs defensive right, just understanding, more than likely, and they're going to run a little bit more behind Trent to try to have as much success. But I agree with you, Wood. I think on those relatively obvious passing situations, 2nd and 8+ or 3rd and 8+, I could see them taking Chris and putting him on their defensive left over McKivitz. I could also see them taking both Chris Jones and Karlaftis and putting them both together on that defensive left offensive.
I'm just ducking and dodging with you here, Dan. And by the way,
dodge, dip, dive.
Yeah, I mean, we know that you had shrimp for lunch based on the proximity.
I didn't.
Okay, anyway.
I didn't. That's disgusting shrimp. I don't like it.
All right.
But I can see them put both those guys on that side again as well.
And by the way, George Karlaftis has 2.5 sacks this postseason, second most in the NFL, trailing only Aiden Hutchinson. We expect him to have a huge role in this game.
Sure, man.